All right, in this quick lesson, I'll introduce you to two new methods that are available on our fixed num objects or our integers, and these are examples of what are called Boolean methods. A Boolean method is a common name for a method that returns a Boolean value, either true or false. So as you may recall, methods are simply messages that we send to the object, and many times the object gives us something back. For example, if I do 1, which is an integer, and I call the next method on it, that gives us back a new integer or a new fixed num object. The object that we get back, however, does not have to be of the same type as the original object. And we can prove this with a method like toS or toString. What that does is take our fixed num object and give us back a string object with the character of the number represented within it. And similarly to how we can return a string from a method, well, a method on an object can also return a Boolean. Sometimes we want to give the object a message, but that message is really more of a question of asking the object something about its state, some kind of truthful statement about how the object operates or a detail about it itself. So for example, we have these two methods called odd and even, and they're called on integers, and they simply return true or false, depending on what method you use, that tests the validity of the statement. So for example, if you write something like p10, and I'm going to write the method name, it's simply odd, and it concludes with a question mark. This is simply part of the method name. This is not some kind of separate symbol that I've added to the end to add functionality. This is simply a method name that has a question mark at the end. It's no different than the next method or the toS method. It's simply a method name that has a question mark at the end. The Ruby design practice is to use the question mark at the end of any Boolean method, which is basically just a method that is going to return a Boolean value like true or false. When we're asking 10 if it's odd or not, we're not expecting to get back anything besides a Boolean. It's either true or it's false. Either 10 is odd, which is true, or either it's not odd, which is false. In this case, when we call odd on 10, we're going to get false because 10 is not odd. It is false that 10 is odd. If I try it instead on an odd number, for example, if I do 11 and I use the odd method with a question mark rather at the end, we're going to get that that is true. It is true that 11 is odd. So again, these methods are messages just like the two above, but they're more of question messages. They're asking the object something about its state. They're asking this number or an integer whether it is odd or not. In this case, 10 is not, so it's going to give us false, and 11 is odd, so it's going to give us back true. Now let's see a complementary example with the even method, which you can probably guess how it works already by now. If I have something like p2, and instead of odd, I'm going to call the even Boolean method. And again, the question mark at the end is just part of its name. It's not some kind of special symbol. It's just a method that concludes with a question mark, and that is the best design feature in Ruby. That basically indicates that this is a Boolean method that is expected to return a true or a false. So if I call even on an integer of 2, it's going to say true. It is true that 2 is even. Conversely, if I do something like 3 and I write even at the end, the exact same method, I'm going to get false because it is false that 3 is even. Again, all we're doing here is simply testing the truthiness of the statement. In this case, we're not asking the object to manipulate itself and give us either a brand new object like 2, as we saw above, or a string. We're simply saying, hey, are you odd or are you even? It's a true or false. It's a yes or no. It's an on or off. So that's hopefully starting to give you a better sense of what a Boolean is supposed to represent. It's an either or. It's a true or false. It's a specific data type for serving that purpose of evaluating the truthiness of some kind of evaluation. Now, just to conclude this lesson, I do want to point out that the odd and even methods are not available on floating point numbers. That's predictably because they don't have a sense of even or odd. And that key takeaway there really is just the fact, again, reiterating that different objects will have different methods. They're going to have certain things in common. For example, a floating point number is still going to have a toS method like a integer or a fixed num does, but it's not going to have an odd or an even method. There's nothing wrong with trying it out, however. For example, if I write 2.99 and I try to call odd on it with the question mark at the end, I'm simply going to get a red error message that says undefined method odd for a float method, simply a no method error. And that's just how these objects are designed by Ruby. That's how they get their design from their classes or their blueprints that allows them to have certain functionalities and also not have certain functionalities that other objects do. It all just depends on what you're working with and what kind of message or communication you want to send it, what it is that you're working with, and what you want it to do, which is all that a message is. It's just a command or a communication or a message to an object. In this case, our floating point objects, or our float objects to be more exact, do not have the ability to interpret a message like odd or even, but our fixed num objects, our integers, do. So this is just a quick introduction to our Boolean methods, or two examples of Boolean methods. As a review, these Boolean methods simply return a true or a false value, nothing else, and they are available on various different methods. These are just two specific Boolean methods, odd or even, that are available on our fixed num integer objects. So I'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll dive more into this concept of truthiness when we look into various operations in Ruby.